The golden letters of Luverty Bank gleamed in the morning sun as Daniel approached, clutching an envelope with trembling fingers. Daniel paused on the immaculate marble steps, his weathered work boots a stark contrast to the polished stone beneath. At 53, his hair had long since turned salt and pepper, and today's light blue button-down, his nicest shirt, seemed woefully inadequate against the opulence before him. The shirt's collar frayed slightly at the edges, just like his nerves. He drew a deep breath and straightened his posture. The purpose that brought him here was greater than his discomfort. The glass doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across marble floors, so polished they reflected his hesitant approach. Suited men and elegantly dressed women moved with purpose, their voices a hushed murmur of importance. Daniel felt the weight of stares as he approached the information desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled hair regarded him with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "May I help you?" she asked, her gaze flicking to his worn jeans and the scuffed leather of his shoes. "I need to speak with someone about making a deposit," Daniel said, his voice softer than he'd intended. "It's important." The woman's smile tightened. "Do you have an account with Luverty Bank?" "No, but Luverty Bank serves a select clientele," she interrupted, her tone cooling several degrees. "Perhaps one of the community banks downtown would better suit your needs." Daniel clutched the envelope tighter. "Please, I just need a few minutes with a manager. It's about—" "Sir," she cut him off again, pressing a button beneath her desk. "Our clients maintain minimum balances in the 7 figures. Our services are tailored to a particular financial echelon." A security guard materialized at Daniel's elbow, a man whose crisp uniform and earpiece suggested both authority and the expectation of compliance. "Is there a problem?" the guard asked, directing the question to the receptionist rather than Daniel. "This gentleman was just leaving," she replied, her dismissal final. Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. "I only need 5 minutes, sir." The guard placed a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I'll have to ask you to exit the premises." Outside, the morning sun felt hotter now, or perhaps it was just the burning in Daniel's chest. He stood on the sidewalk, envelope still gripped in his hand, and stared at the golden doors that had closed against him. 7 years as a widower had taught him about closed doors, but this rejection stung differently. 3 days earlier, Daniel had been repairing Mrs. Calloway's kitchen cabinets when his phone rang. After Martha's death, he'd thrown himself into his carpentry business, finding solace in the honest work of his hands, in transforming raw materials into something useful and beautiful. His late wife had always said his hands were his ministry. "Daniel speaking," he answered, cradling the phone between ear and shoulder as he measured a replacement hinge. "Mr. Reynolds? This is Thomas Green from Landower, Finch and Green. I'm calling regarding your Uncle Howard's estate." Daniel nearly dropped his pencil. Uncle Howard, his mother's brother, had been the black sheep of the family, making his fortune in real estate development before disappearing into a life of luxury that had no room for relatives from modest backgrounds. Daniel hadn't spoken to him in over 20 years. "My uncle passed last month, I'm afraid. Heart failure. The reading of the will was delayed due to some international holdings that needed verification." Daniel set down his tools entirely. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure why you're calling me. Howard and I weren't close." A pause on the line. "Mr. Reynolds, your uncle named you as his sole beneficiary." The kitchen seemed to tilt slightly. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake. In his later years, your uncle followed your life from a distance. He was impressed by how you handled adversity. His words, not mine." Daniel thought about the 7 years since Martha's cancer diagnosis, the 5 years of fighting it together, and the 2 years since she'd gone home to the Lord. He thought about raising their daughter alone, about the long nights wondering how faith worked when prayers for healing went unanswered. "How much are we talking about?" Daniel finally asked. Thomas Green cleared his throat. "After taxes, approximately $47 million. The cabinet hinge clattered to the floor. Now, standing outside Louverty Bank for the second time that week, Daniel felt a strange sense of determination. The first rejection had stung, but this wasn't about him. He'd spent 2 sleepless nights praying about Uncle Howard's unexpected gift and what to do with it. The answer had come in the form of a memory. Martha in her hospital bed, talking about what they would do if they ever won the lottery. "We'd help families like ours," she'd said, her once vibrant face gaunt, but her eyes still bright with purpose. "So no one would have to choose between treatment and keeping their home." The memory of her words had led him to the Children's Hospital yesterday. There he'd met Dr. Catherine Lynn and 7-year-old Timothy Brooks, whose battle with a rare form of leukemia had depleted his single mother's resources and hope in equal measure. Today, Daniel carried Timothy's photograph in his pocket alongside the cashier's check. He also carried something else, the letter from Uncle Howard's lawyer confirming his inheritance. If wealth was the language Louverty Bank understood, then Daniel would reluctantly speak it. This time, he was met at the door by 2 security guards. "Sir, we asked you not to return," the taller one said, recognition dawning in his eyes. Daniel stood straighter, summoning every ounce of the confidence he'd never quite felt. "I have documentation this time. I need to speak with your manager about a significant deposit." The guards exchanged glances, but didn't move. Around them, bank employees had begun to notice the confrontation, several gathering in the doorway behind the guards. A woman in a tailored grey suit pushed forward, her expression a professional mask of concern. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" she asked, her question directed at the guards rather than Daniel. "This individual was asked to leave earlier this week," the first guard explained. "He's returned despite our request." The woman assessed Daniel with a quick, dismissive glance. "Sir, if you continue to disturb our establishment, we'll be forced to call the authorities." Daniel reached slowly into his jacket pocket and removed the folded letter, extending it toward the woman. "My name is Daniel Reynolds. I recently inherited a substantial estate from my uncle, Howard J. Reynolds." The woman took the letter with visible reluctance, her eyes scanning the letterhead before widening slightly. She read further, her expression shifting subtly. "I see," she said, her voice notably warmer. "Mr. Reynolds, I apologize for the confusion. I'm Victoria Hargrove, branch manager. Please come inside and we can discuss your banking needs in my office." Daniel remained rooted to the spot. "Before we do that, I'd like to understand something. 3 days ago, I came here dressed exactly as I am now, and I was treated like an intruder. Nothing about me has changed, except that now you've seen a piece of paper telling you I'm wealthy." Victoria's professional smile faltered. The gathering crowd of employees shifted uncomfortably. Daniel reached into his other pocket and withdrew the photograph of Timothy, holding it up so everyone could see the smiling child with his hospital bracelet and brave, tired eyes. "This is Timothy. He's 7 years old and fighting for his life while his mother works 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. I came here 3 days ago to establish a foundation that would pay for his treatment and help other families like his. I was turned away because of how I look." The silence that followed was profound. Some of the staff looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Others stared at the photo of Timothy with dawning understanding. Daniel continued, his voice quiet but clear. "My late wife and I spent 5 years in and out of hospitals. We were blessed to have insurance and savings, but we met too many families who lost everything trying to save someone they loved. The inheritance I received is a stewardship, not a possession." He turned the photo of Timothy around and looked at it himself, remembering the boy's laughter when Daniel had shown him a simple wooden toy he'd carved during the visit. "I grew up believing that we should not judge by appearances, that what matters is the heart, that when we serve the least among us, we're serving something greater than ourselves." Daniel looked up, meeting Victoria's eyes directly. I'm still the same carpenter I was when your staff escorted me out. I still drive a 12-year-old truck and live in the same house where my wife and I raised our daughter. The only difference is now I have the means to help people like Timothy. I was 19 when I learned what it means to be truly seen. My father was a carpenter too, taught me everything I know about working with wood. We were driving home from a job site when we saw a woman stranded on the highway, her car smoking from under the hood. It was pouring rain, and at least a dozen cars had passed her by. Dad pulled over without hesitation. The woman was well-dressed, clearly wealthy, and initially frightened when two men in work clothes approached her car. But Dad just smiled and asked if she needed help. We ended up driving her 30 miles to her destination, a charity gala at some country club. When we arrived, soaking wet and covered in engine grease, the valets tried to direct us to the service entrance. The woman, I never knew her name, linked her arms through ours and walked us straight through the front door. "These men," she announced to the startled crowd, "are my honored guests. They saw someone in need when all of you would have driven past." I remember how the room fell silent, how people in expensive clothes suddenly couldn't meet our eyes, and I remember what she said next. The measure of a person isn't in their wallet, but in their willingness to stop for a stranger in the rain. As Daniel finished sharing this memory, he noticed something had changed in the faces before him. The security guards stood with heads slightly bowed. Victoria Hargrove's professional mask had cracked entirely, revealing something raw and human beneath. "Mr. Reynolds," she said finally, her voice different now, "on behalf of Luverty Bank, I offer our sincerest apologies. What happened to you was inexcusable." One of the security guards stepped forward. "Sir, I'm sorry. I was just following protocol. But that's no excuse." Daniel nodded, acknowledging their words without immediately accepting the apology. He reached up to touch the small wooden cross he wore on a leather cord around his neck, a habit he'd developed in the years since Martha's passing. He'd carved it himself from a piece of their bedpost the week after her funeral, a tangible reminder of both loss and faith. "I'm not here for apologies," he said quietly. "I'm here because Timothy and children like him need help that I can now provide. So the question is, will you work with me to establish this foundation, or should I take my uncle's $47 million elsewhere?" Victoria straightened her suit jacket, professionalism reasserting itself, but tempered now with genuine respect. "Mr. Reynolds, we would be honored to help you establish this foundation. If you'll follow me to my office, we can begin the paperwork immediately." As they walked through the bank's opulent lobby, Daniel noticed how the same employees who had stared at him with disdain now regarded him with a mixture of shame and curiosity. He felt no satisfaction in their discomfort, only a quiet hope that perhaps something beyond a financial transaction might take place here today. Victoria's office was appointed with tasteful luxury, leather furniture, original artwork, and a view of the city that emphasized the bank's literal and figurative elevation. She gestured for Daniel to take a seat across from her desk. "Before we begin," Daniel said, remaining standing, "I'd like to be clear about something. This foundation will serve families regardless of their background, faith, or financial status. The only criterion is need." Victoria nodded. "Of course. We can structure it however you wish. And I want a board that includes people who have experienced medical financial hardship firsthand, not just financial experts. That's unconventional, but certainly doable." Daniel finally sat down, placing Timothy's photo on the desk between them. "One more thing. I'd like the entire staff who was present today, including the security team, to be involved in the first disbursement of funds. I want them to meet Timothy and his mother." Victoria's carefully composed expression faltered. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm not sure that's—" "It's non-negotiable," Daniel interrupted gently. "This isn't about embarrassing anyone. It's about connecting the work to the purpose. If Luverty Bank wants to manage this foundation, your team needs to see the faces behind the numbers." After a moment's consideration, Victoria nodded. "I understand. We can arrange it." As they proceeded through the necessary paperwork, Daniel felt a strange sense of his late wife's presence, not in any mystical way, but in the certainty that he was honoring her heart. The wealth that had so unexpectedly come into his possession wasn't truly his. It was a resource entrusted to him for purposes beyond himself. 3 weeks later, the Timothy Brooks Foundation held its inaugural event in the main lobby of Luverty Bank. The space, normally a monument to financial achievement, had been transformed. Children's artwork hung alongside the expensive paintings. Families whose lives had been devastated by medical bills shared their stories with bankers who had never worried about choosing between medicine and food. Timothy himself, thin but smiling, cut the ceremonial ribbon with his mother standing proudly beside him. The security guards, who had once escorted Daniel from the premises, now watched over the event with a different kind of attention, seeing rather than just looking. Daniel stood slightly apart from the crowd, observing the mingling of worlds that rarely intersected. Victoria Hargrove approached, her usual professional armor softened by the day's significance. "You've changed things here," she said quietly, "not just for the families we're helping, but for us." Daniel smiled, his hand automatically finding the wooden cross at his neck. Recognition isn't change. What matters is what happens after today, when the cameras are gone, and it's just daily decisions about who matters and who doesn't. Victoria nodded, understanding the gentle challenge in his words. The bank's board has unanimously approved a matching program for the foundation. For every dollar donated, Luverty will match it. "That's generous," Daniel acknowledged. "It's the least we can do." She hesitated, then added, "Some of us have been talking about establishing a micro-loan program for small businesses in underserved communities. Would you be willing to advise us?" Daniel's smile deepened. "I know some excellent carpenters who could use business loans." As the event continued around them, Daniel felt a tugging at his sleeve. He looked down to find Timothy standing there, his small face serious. "Mr. Daniel, I made something for you." The boy held out a clumsily folded paper crane. "My nurse taught me how. She says in Japan, if you fold 1,000 cranes, you get a wish." Daniel crouched down to Timothy's level, accepting the gift with the reverence it deserved. "It's beautiful. Thank you. I wished for other kids to have help like I'm getting," Timothy whispered. "Is that okay? Or should I have wished to get better?" Daniel felt his throat tighten. He glanced up to see Timothy's mother watching them, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Timothy," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion, "that wish shows what's in your heart, and that's worth more than all the money in this bank." The boy nodded solemnly, then threw his arms around Daniel's neck in an impulsive hug before running back to his mother. Daniel stood, carefully placing the paper crane in his pocket next to his carpenter's pencil. He caught sight of his reflection in one of the bank's many polished surfaces, the same worn jeans, the same blue button-down shirt, the same weathered face. Unchanged, yet somehow different. The wooden cross rested against his heart, a simple thing made by imperfect hands. Like the foundation, like Timothy's paper crane, like all worthy things, not valuable for its materials, but for the love embedded in its making. One of the security guards who had first turned him away approached hesitantly. "Sir, I just wanted to say, I've worked here 12 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Thank you for not giving up that first day." Daniel extended his hand. "My name is Daniel, and thank you for being here today." As they shook hands, Daniel recalled something his uncle's lawyer had told him during their first meeting. Howard said, "He watched how you lived after your wife died, how you continued to help others despite your own grief. He said it made him question everything he'd spent his life pursuing." Perhaps that was the true inheritance, not the millions now flowing into the foundation, but the recognition that wealth measured in dollars was the lesser kind. The greater wealth was in stopping for strangers in the rain, in seeing beyond appearances, in folding paper cranes for others when you yourself are suffering. As the afternoon light slanted through Luverty Bank's towering windows, it caught the golden letters of the institution's name, making them gleam. But Daniel's eyes were drawn instead to Timothy's mother, who stood talking with Victoria Hargrove, the bank manager, listening with genuine attention to a woman she would have previously ignored. This, Daniel thought, touching the wooden cross at his throat, is what transformation looks like, not in grand gestures or public apologies, but in the small, daily decision to see the value in each person, regardless of their bank balance or the clothes they wear. Timothy ran past, laughing with another child whose family had been helped by the foundation. Daniel watched them, remembering Martha's words in that hospital room 7 years ago. "We'd help families like ours. We are, my love," he whispered to the memory of her. "We are."